The rabbis have lots of different ways of categorizing the mitzvot, the different commandments. And one of the categories, or the divisions they use, is the idea of hukim, mishpatim, and edot. The testimonies, the laws, the statutes. You've probably heard those different words before at some point, or you almost certainly have, right? It's actually the very first question of the four sons at the Passover Seder. Hacham mahu omer, maha edot v'hukim v'mishpatim asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu etchem. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws that God has commanded us? And the very first category, the edot, the testimonies, right? These are the rituals that bear witness to something. Things like our tzitzit that are there as a sign, as a reminder, or the tefillin, or the mitzvah of brit milah, which is supposed to be a sign of the covenant. Shabbat. These are the edot. They bear witness to God and to the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And then the next one, the mishpatim, those are the things that make sense, the laws. Don't steal, don't lie, give tzedakah. They're the things that we can really simply understand. But it's that third category, the hukim, right, which sounds familiar because our parsha today is hukat. It's about them. The things that don't really make sense, that are hard to understand. What is the reason it's a commandment? Why is it a mitzvah? Why is it a mitzvah to not plant seeds of different types next to each other? Or why does God care if you wear a jacket made with different fabrics, different linen? It's hard to understand, and these are the hukim. And in our parsha, we have the most famous, most well-known example of a mitzvah that really confuses everyone about why it exists and what it means and what it is doing. The para adumah, the red heifer. It's a strange ritual, one that is very difficult today for us to relate to. When a person comes in contact with a dead body, with a corpse, they become ritually impure, tameh. And the ritual of the para adumah is given to purify them. A red cow without a spot or blemish, that's never worn a yoke, never been strapped down and put to work in the field, is slaughtered. It is then burned, and cedar and hyssop and dyed wool are added to the fire. And finally, the ashes are taken and mixed with a purified water and sprinkled on the person in some kind of a purifying ritual. It is hard to relate to and hard to understand today. And the question then is, what is the meaning of it? And it's a question that the rabbis have been asking for the ages. Rashi, he gave up asking. He says, don't even ask. Don't even ask. The question is actually just what the other nations use to insult the Jews. Why do you do this strange thing? He says, that's what they ask. We shouldn't ask that. We do it because God said so. Maimonides, the great rationalist, he tells us there's certainly a reasonable explanation for it. We just don't know what it is, and we probably will never know. It was in response to some ancient custom that the other nations at the time God gave the command to us were doing. And since those customs and traditions were lost, we don't have the context to really understand what this mitzvah is all about. But we do it nonetheless. A modern commentator, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, may his memory be a blessing, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom or the Commonwealth of Britain, he once taught that it's meant to be understood rationally. That it isn't meant to be rational. These hukim and laws like the para adumah are meant to bypass the rational part of our brain and get to the unconscious part, right? The part that Sigmund Freud was obsessed with. The part that truly, according to some, controls our actions, not the rational thinking part of our brain, but the part beneath that we don't even know exists. And that the mitzvot like this are meant to influence that part of us and impact us in ways we won't even recognize or understand. I have to admit, I don't really find any of those answers that satisfying. But it's a question that's been asked by many rabbis before. Many other rabbis have given great answers. So I won't claim that my answer is better, but a little bit different. It works for me. And everyone can choose the answer that works best for them. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, back in the Talmud, says, it's a decree. The ritual doesn't actually purify anyone, and the contact with the dead doesn't actually make anybody impure. But we do it because God said so. Now, the second part of that, of we just do it because God said so without asking questions, that I have a harder time relating to, like Rashi's answer. But the first part really got me thinking. The act doesn't purify you, and the initial act of being in contact with the dead doesn't actually make you impure. So the question is, what is this all about then? Because the idea of tameh, impurity, and tahor, purity, in Judaism, have a rich history. These are complex concepts in our tradition. The English translations don't really do them justice, but it's not just a corpse that makes a person tameh, impure. A woman after childbirth is impure, is tameh. And there are other situations in life, which we can learn about in health class, that also can make a person tameh. And so the question is, what are these all about? And so if we go with that idea of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that the act itself doesn't actually make a person tameh, I'm left with an answer of one of my own teachers, Rabbi Ed Feinstein, who had a really interesting take, I think, on the whole concept of purity and impurity in Judaism. First, he says, keep those terms in Hebrew. The English words pure and impure have a lot of connotation, a lot of baggage that come from other cultures and other systems and other ways of thought that aren't part of the Jewish concept of them. So we should keep it in the Ivrit, in the Hebrew, tameh and tahor. And then he asks, what is it that a person can or can't do when they are tameh or tahor? Right? Somebody who is tameh traditionally is excluded from participating in certain Jewish rituals. Right? The traditional understanding is that they are forbidden from doing these acts. But Rabbi Feinstein actually flips this understanding on its head, and he teaches that somebody who is tameh, it's not that they're prohibited from doing these, they're exempt from those rituals. It's not that they're not allowed to do the ritual, they're exempt, they don't need it. He says the purpose of religion in general, Judaism in particular, of all of our rituals and practices, is to guide us towards living a good life, a life of meaning, a life of value. And that a person who has touched the edges of humanity, of life, who's experienced birth or death, that for those people, they don't need the rituals to remind them of the significance of life, because they've had an experience that conveys that in a way much deeper than the rituals can. Personally, I can really understand and relate to that idea. As a rabbi, or for the chazan as well, as a clergy person, we do funerals. We officiate and attend lots of funerals. It's part of the job. And death makes people uncomfortable. When someone asks me, Rabbi, why are you so dressed up today? And I say, oh, I'm going to a funeral. I just came from a funeral. Right? People often go with, I'm sorry. And it's a strange position being the clergy person at these, because oftentimes you didn't know personally the person who died, who passed away. And actually, as a rabbi, I can speak for myself at least, I find officiating funerals is one of the most meaningful parts of the rabbinate. Right? It's strange to say it's one of the parts I enjoy the most, but it's one of the times you see the impact you're having on a family and the difference you're making in their lives. Right? High holidays, you can talk to 1,000 people. You don't know if anyone's really paying attention. Or after a good class, you don't know if in a week or a month anyone's really doing anything in their life differently because of what you taught. But when you're sitting with a family facing a loss, you can feel the difference, and you know the difference you're making, the impact you have. So it's rewarding. But the third part of it is that every time I leave the cemetery, it puts things in perspective. The argument I may have had with a friend, the disagreement with somebody at work, or whatever nonsense I'm dealing with my internet provider like Rogers this week, it puts the rest of life in perspective. When I leave the cemetery, I recognize the things that are really important. But that lasts just a temporary time. And that, according to Rabbi Feinstein, is what the rest of our tradition is about. That the person who's experienced birth or death, who's tameh, doesn't need the rituals temporarily. It's not that they're forbidden and they're punished, that they're dirty in some way, but they simply don't need it. They have an understanding and a recognition of what all the rest of our tradition is trying to tell us. What Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel would have called living with a sense of radical amazement, seeing the sanctity in each of life's moments. So the question then is, what can we learn from this mitzvah? We can learn that the rest of our life, we have to work hard to get to that place. And that the mitzvot, the ones we understand or don't understand, are there to help raise us to that level, to recognize the things in life that matter, to cultivate gratitude, to help us to appreciate the momentousness of life, the people we share it with. So we say a blessing before a meal, or we offer a prayer of thanks after it. We say the Shechianu when we get new clothes or reach an auspicious occasion like a big anniversary, or we take a moment to appreciate the things we have. We gather our loved ones together on Friday nights for dinner, and we take time off of work and other activities to spend it with the people we love and care about. To realize that they're the thing that's important. It's not our job and our career, it's our families, our friends, our relationships are the part that really matters. So we sit with them, we chat with them, we mark time in Judaism because time is out of our control. We take days of rest to rejuvenate ourselves and our relationships. We celebrate the Chagim, implanting us in the past, in moments in history, in slavery in Egypt, walking through the Red Sea to redemption, standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, being saved in Shushan, and every other time throughout history that our people were saved from destruction. Those rituals, those holidays put us in frame of reference as part of something bigger. We give tzedakah, we count tithes, we visit the sick. We share the blessings we have with others, and it makes us appreciate our blessings that much more. We talk to God, whether it's the words of the Siddur or words from our heart. We say thank you for our blessings. Sometimes we ask God for our needs. Sometimes we get angry and yell at God when life isn't going our way. But we recognize that there's something bigger than us in the universe, that we're not the center of the universe. There's something infinitely greater than each of us. And that's the heart of Judaism and Jewish rituals. So when I read about the Parah Adumah, the part to me that's interesting is less, why do we do this specific act? But instead, why it is, as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, why does death create that sense of impurity, that state of tameh? And I think Rabbi Feinstein's answer is a great answer. It's not that it's a punishment. It's not that it's something that excludes us. It's those moments we don't need the ritual to tell us what's important, because we know. And then the ritual then of Parah Adumah is there to help bring us back to it, to hold us there a little bit longer. Because as someone who less than a year ago held a newborn daughter in my hands and went, wow, this is a miracle, it very quickly went to, oh my gosh, when will she sleep? It's hard to stay in that place of recognizing the miracle. And that's where our traditions and our rituals come in to hold us there. So as we continue with our Musaf service, we should ask ourselves those questions. How can our tradition raise us up from our daily distractions? How can our traditions and rituals refocus us, help us to remember what's truly important? And how can we better incorporate them into our lives? Shabbat Shalom. We continue page 354 with Musaf. Please rise.